Howdy. My name is John, and this video is kind of a combination of my December 2021 wrap-up, some stats for my 2021 reading year, the worst 10 books I read this year, and the best 20 books that I read this year. The first book I finished this month was My True Love Gave to Me, 12 Holiday Stories. This was edited by Stephanie Perkins, and she also wrote one of the stories in this book. There are 11 other authors that wrote stories in this as well. My favorite story was actually by Perkins herself. It was the only 5-star story that I gave, and primarily the reason I gave it 5 stars is because it's set in Asheville, North Carolina, which is about an hour drive from where I live. Perkins got the reputation of Asheville pretty well on the nose in that story. There were 4 stories that I gave 4 stars to. There were 5 stories that I gave 3 stars to. And then there were a couple of stories that I gave 2 stars. The 2-star stories were especially disappointing because those were both the kind of fantasy themed stories of the book. And I would have expected to like those more, but neither one of those really worked for me. When I averaged all that out, I got to 3.33, and so I gave it a 3-star rating on Goodreads. I first heard about this book on Lady Jane Books. The next book I finished was this translation and commentary of Purgatorio. This is part of the Divine Comedy by Dante, and this translation is by Robert and Jean Hollander. This is part of a read-along sponsored by Tom L.A. Books. I think we started Purgatorio somewhere around June or July, and of course we finished it this month. Tom has already done a couple of cantos from Paradiso, but I haven't got it started on Paradiso yet. I'm saving that for next month. I am also still reading out of this translation. This translation is by Longfellow, and it was translated in the 1800s, and so I was struggling to understand what was going on. Plus, this does not have any commentary, and it's really kind of necessary to have a commentary when you're going through the Divine Comedy, especially for the first time, because Dante uses a lot of historical figures that would have been well known in his time, but are obscure now. I did give this book 4 stars on Goodreads. It is a good commentary and translation, and I am enjoying this read-through of Dante, but it doesn't really quite reach a level of 5 stars for me. The next group of books I finished is the Remnants trilogy by Margaret Pinard. Margaret has her own BookTube channel, which I'll link in the description below. I've already done a dedicated review to this, but in brief, I gave the first book, The Keening, 4 stars. I gave the second book, The Grasping Root, 5 stars. And I gave the final book, Wrack and Spindrift, 4 stars. The next 2 books I finished are the final 2 books in the Black Company series. This was part of a read-along sponsored by Mark from Slowly Read. The next to the last book is Water Sleeps. I really did enjoy this book. I gave it 4 stars, even though it's not my favorite of the series. In fact, it's probably my least favorite of the series that I did give 4 stars to. The last book is Soldiers Live, and Soldiers Live is actually my favorite of the series. This does have a complex storyline with multiple points of view that all kind of weave in together, and for me, it was just a good conclusion to the series. And this is the only 5-star of the Black Company series that I have given. The next book is The Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis. Now, I heard a lot about this book when I was growing up, but I never got around to reading it. This was supposed to be a read-along sponsored by David Wiley that was supposed to happen in November, but neither one of us really could fit this into our November schedule, which is a little silly considering how thin it is. But again, I went ahead and put this off to December, and it only took me about an afternoon to finish. So it's a quick read. It's only a little over 60 pages long. I think this book is best for its intended audience, but I still think non-Christians will get some use out of this book as well. It does have some interesting commentary on what it means to be human. The last book I finished in December is The Bear and the Nightingale. This is by Katherine Arden, and it's the first book in her Winternight trilogy. I was really looking forward to this book. There is a read-along sponsored by She Was Only Evie this month, and they're going to continue with books 2 and 3 of this series. But I'm not going to continue on with this series because this book was really a disappointment to me. I've heard a lot of good things about it, but for me it really fell flat, especially the first 200 pages. The first 200 pages were, I was able to get through them. I wasn't that tempted to DNF the book, but I did find it kind of boring. The last 100 pages, plus a little bit, are actually fairly decent. Those last 100 pages by itself I probably would have given 4 stars to, because the action picks up and it just becomes a much more interesting book. But the first 2/3 of the book I would have given 2 stars to. So in the end I averaged that out to 3 stars. Alright, next I'm going to do some reading stats for the year. In total, I read 87 books, and then there was one book that I started and did not finish. That book was The Eye of the World by Robert Jordan. Out of those books, I gave 16 5 stars, I gave 44 4 stars, I gave 26 of them 3 stars, and I gave 1 a 2-star rating. I did not have any 1-star ratings this year. Out of these 87 books, 69 were new to me, and 18 were rereads. I did look at the gender breakdown to see how many men wrote the books and how many women. 56 of the books were written by men, 22 of the books were written by women, and then I had 9 books that were co-written by a man and a woman. I did look to see how much money I spent on books this year. This year it was $831, and this compares to $595 that I spent last year. I also tried to look and see how many of the new books that I purchased I actually read this year. Now, I didn't look at books that I purchased used because I didn't really keep track of those, and I don't want to try to go through those because I bought a lot more used books than I did new. The percentage of the books that I bought used is very low, especially compared to new. If I did this correctly, I purchased 20 new books. Now, 3 of those were omnibus editions of The Black Company. If I count those as separate books, it brings my total of books to 24. Out of those 24 books, there are only 4 that I did not read. I also did buy a handful of ebooks this year. I purchased a total of 5 ebooks, and I only did not read 1 of them. I also got 2 ebooks for free, and I did not read either of the ebooks that I got for free. The last stat that I kept track of is the authors that I read the most books by. There are 3 authors that I read a total of 5 books from. The first one is Isaac Asimov. The next 2 are a pair of Margarets. These are the 5 books from Margaret Pinard, and then 5 books from Margaret Weiss. Next, I have the 10 books from the Black Company series and its author, Glen. My most read author of the year really shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone because it's Piers Anthony, and I read 11 of his books this year. Alright, now let's talk about the 10 worst books that I read this year. Couple things to note. Number 1 is I did not include any rereads in this list. If I had, sorry Beth Ann, but Dragons of Spring Dawning would have made this list. That's the 3rd book in the Dragonlance Chronicles. Another thing to note is I only had 1 book that I gave 2 stars to. I did not have any books that I gave 1 star. All but 1 of the books in this list got 3 stars from me, which, 3 stars is a fairly decent book. Definitely had issues with it, but overall it's still a good read. I also did not include the book that I did not finish. You can't properly judge a book that I didn't finish. And in this case, I did not finish The Eye of the World because it's just a really long book and it was the wrong book for me at the wrong time. Number 10 on my list is Where the Crawdads Sing. This book was really popular on BookTube last year, and I kind of understand why it got the hype that it did. It just did not work for me. I didn't find the story that interesting. Now, on number 9, I do want to say I do like Margaret. This is not anything against her, but her first novel very much reads like someone's first novel. I found the writing kind of awkward, and as a result, I never really could get into a good reading rhythm with this book. Now, apparently I'm the only one on this because all the other reviews that I've seen, they've enjoyed this book. Number 8 on this list is another book that I've seen that's been very popular on BookTube, and that's The Bear and the Nightingale. Again, the first 2/3 of this book, I really struggled to have any interest in the story. It did get saved by the last third, but here again, how many people are actually going to get to that last third? Number 7 is actually a pair of books. This is The Scorched Trials and the Death Cure by James Dashner. This is books 2 and 3 of the Maze Runner series. Unfortunately, these books just never lived up to the first book in the series. They're okay, just I did not find them as interesting. Now, I have also read the prequel called The Kill Order, and I did enjoy that book. Number 6 is Dracula by Bram Stoker. I think this book partly suffers because of its age and partly because of the way it's written. This book is written as a series of letters and journal entries, and it's just not the most interesting story. Now, obviously, there are parts of it that are more interesting than others, and it's easy to see why this is a classic. It didn't really work for me. Number 5 is Riverwind the Plainsman. This is one of the Dragonlance Preludes novels. This book had an uninteresting side character, and the story itself really wasn't that interesting either. This one just did not work for me. Number 4 is A Tale of Two Cities. My problem with this one is the story actually gets lost in the storytelling. Now, I did listen to this one on audio as well as read along in a physical book. And because I was listening along, I could kind of hear the lyricism of the prose, but I'm not a pretty prose person. I actually need a good story. And the story in this just isn't told very well. Had it been told differently, I think I would have enjoyed it more. Number 3 is The Stranger by Albert Camus. This story just didn't work for me at all. I found the main character uninterested, and I was really unconcerned with his fate. Number 2 is Persuasion by Jane Austen. Honestly, for the most part, I just found this novel boring. And there were parts of this book that I did appreciate. But overall, it was my least favorite of the 3-star reads that I read this year. And then finally, the worst book that I read this year was Othello by William Shakespeare. I did not enjoy this at all. The reason it got 2 stars and not 1 star is I do realize this is a play and I'm not really used to reading plays. I also realize it's over 400 years old. So I struggled with the language of this, and I really struggled with the story as well. I didn't find it to be that interesting of a story. Alright, now I'm going to cover the top 20 books that I read this year. Now I went ahead and made this list 20 because I did have 16 books that I gave 5 stars to, and I actually wanted to highlight all of those books. Now, 2 of those books were rereads. One of them was I, Claudius by Robert Graves. The other one was Basic Economics by Thomas Sowell. And because they were rereads, they do not show up in my top 20. Number 20 is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. Now, I did struggle as to whether I was going to put Parable of the Sower or Parable of the Talents on this list, but I went ahead and went with the first book in the series. The first half of both of those books it struggles to get into a good pace, but once you get about halfway, both books really pick up, and they're both enjoyable reads. Number 19 is A Merchant in Orient and Other Tales by David Wiley. David is another booktuber, and I'll include a link to his channel in the description below. This is a collection of short stories, and I really enjoyed most of the short stories. I think I gave 4 stars to nearly all of them. I think there were a couple that only got 3 stars, and then there was one story that I gave 5 stars to. Number 18 is Fast Forward by Martha Jones. Martha is also another booktuber, and I'll provide a link to her channel. This is a kind of graphic novel. It's really more a series of comic strips, and that all follow a central character named Mary, who is a vampire. Most of these strips are really humorous. I laughed out loud numerous times reading this book. Number 17 is Sword of Kaigon by M.L. Wong. This story really is unique in the fantasy that I've read. It had a really interesting main character. There were a few minor things that bothered me, but overall, I really enjoyed reading this book. Number 16 is Searching for Marilyn Monroe, Animals and Other Parables by Pei Vio. Pei is another booktuber who has the channel attention. If you haven't watched any of Pei's videos, you really need to give his channel a try. He has really original videos, and this book is just as original as the videos are. One of the stories in this book, titled 53, is probably one of my favorite stories that I read this year. Had that story just been a book in and of itself, it would have made my top 10 list. Number 15 is Wrack and Spindrift by Margaret Pinard. This book is really good. It just missed a 5-star rating from me, and this book rates the highest of the 4-star ratings. Number 14 is How Precious Was That While by Piers Anthony. This is the lowest rated of the 5-star reads that I read this year. This one is really good. The biggest problem is about the first 100 pages are a repeat of his earlier autobiography. The original stuff is really good. It's just a little bit tedious to read that book, especially when you read it like I did immediately after reading his first autobiography. If you give those autobiographies some space, it would serve as a good reminder. Number 13 is the landmark Julius Caesar. This edition does a really great job providing maps and notes to explain the original text. The original text itself probably would have only gotten about a 4-star from me. The notes really helped me to understand what the actual text was saying. And part of the problem is it's a translated text, and there are gaps in the text, and so sometimes the translators kind of have to fill in those gaps. Number 12 is The Greatest Generation by Tom Brokaw. This is a series of short biographies of men and women who were in their late teens and early 20s during the Second World War. Number 11 is Flint the King. This is one of the books of the Dragonlance Preludes. The book's really well written, and it has enjoyable side characters, and the main character Flint is also really enjoyable in this book as well. Number 10 is Soldiers Live by Glen Cook. This is the 10th and final book in his Black Company series. This was the only book of this series to get 5 stars. The Silver Spike almost made my top 20 list, and I did give a number of the books 4 stars. Number 9 is Bio of an Ogre by Piers Anthony. This is his first autobiography, and it's definitely an enjoyable read if you're a fan of Piers Anthony like I am. I also think that his 2 autobiographies would be of interest to anyone who is looking to be a published author, as he does give a lot of good advice in those books. Number 8 is Kindermore by Mary Kirchhoff. Mary Kirchhoff co-wrote Flint the King. This is another one of the books in the Dragonlance Prelude series. This was really just an enjoyable book. All of the characters really worked in this book, and it was an interesting adventure. Number 7 is Electric City by Thomas Hager. This is a nonfiction book about Henry Ford's attempt to buy the Muscle Shoals Dam and power plants along the Tennessee River. Now, this book probably held a little bit of special interest for me because of my profession. I am an electrical engineer. Still, I think anyone who enjoys history, especially the history of the period between World War I and World War II, will really enjoy this book. Number 6 is A Tryst of Fate. This is by Piers Anthony, and this is the most recent of his Xanth series. I just really thoroughly enjoyed reading this book. It was just a lot of fun to read. Number 5 is The Grasping Root by Margaret Pinard. This is the second book in her Remnants series. In this book, I really got invested in the characters and the story. I really enjoyed reading this book. Number 4 is Brothers in Arms by Margaret Weiss and Dawn Perrin. This book is the second and final book in the Dragonlance Raceland Chronicles. This book follows Raceland and Caramon as they join a mercenary company. I've really enjoyed the military fantasy fiction that I've read this year, and this is the finest example of that. Number 3 is Skeleton Key. This is the next to most recent book in Piers Anthony's Xanth series. This was another great adventure. I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed the ending of this book as well. I've really been pleased with the last few Xanth novels that have been published. They've been among some of the finest of the series. Number 2 is The Positronic Man by Isaac Asimov and Robert Silverberg. This novel is based off Asimov's short story, The Bicentennial Man. The story follows a robot, but really the story is about what it means to be a human. Can anybody guess the author of my number 1 book? Yeah, you're right. It is another Piers Anthony book. This one is Firefly, and this book is strange. It's unusual from what Anthony normally writes. This is a book that people will either love or hate. It follows 5 main characters who are all kind of middle-aged and really kind of broken by life. It follows these 5 characters as they try to solve a mystery and hunt down a monster. This has certainly been an interesting year of reading. I've read a lot of great books this year, and I have a lot of great memories from being on BookTube and participating in the community. I want to thank everyone who has taken the time to watch my videos and comment on them. Best wishes for your reading year in 2022.